Loops are back on.
The loop is back on.
Loop-de-loop-de.
Welcome to MTG Evolving Wild. My name's Mark. I'm here with Cody.
I'm Cody.
I'm here with Ron.
Hello.
And I'm here with our guest today, Jacob.
Hi.
Jacob is our friend who has played Magic for a lot longer than we have and has some insight and some experience that we have not gotten to see within the game.
Yes, he is the man who got both Mark and I into the game, so I'm excited to dig in to see the origin of the man who started our origin.
The man, the myth, the legend.
He is the legend.
The Jacob.
The Jacob. So when did you start playing Magic the Gathering?
So I think it was around like 2006, 2005.
Okay.
And my first memories of all were going to my friend Anastas's house. And I remember we played some butchered version of the game entirely, where it was some like war type game where like we pointed at a color on the back of the card and flipped it over, and if it was the color we called, then we got a point or some shit like that. Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah, right? a little bit.
Okay.
Poopy.
But that's like my first memory. Mm-hmm. And then after that, my brother and his friends started to get into it. And that was around Ravnica time. And so it was a pretty good time to get into it because
that was the first
Ravnica. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It's interesting because all the Ravnicas have kind of played a like touchstone in my time with Magic, because the first one was when I first started playing. Second one was when I probably properly started to learn the rules. I also, first like events I went to was Return to Ravnica, maybe a little bit before then.
Okay.
And then most recently, I think around when I got you guys into it, might have been Return to Ravnica.
I think that was
the third iteration.
Just before we got into it.
Yeah.
But that's
around
really
that
cool.
time. That was probably part of why I wanted to get you into it.
Uh-huh.
Because like that and Innistrad, I feel like thematically are very good to get into it because the colors associate to the theme entirely.
Yeah.
You can see other ones that try to like reach a bit more with the colors because it's kind of hard to abstract something like color into flavor and kind of theme of a set.
They do it very obviously in those sets, and I think that allows it for newer players to just like get introduced to it super easily. And I kind of mentioned before, that was one of the things that really got me into Magic was when you showed me the Ristic Studies video of, I think it was Ravnica, like something about like the art of that.
Oh yeah,
that was the first thing you ever showed me with Magic, and I was very much moved by that and like picking a faction within that world and like kind of relating it more to personality, which I think the game engine is really good at doing, based on the color pie and all that.
Right, definitely.
So did you have any prior experiences with card games or TCGs or anything like that?
I remember buying Pokemon packs.
Ooh.
And just liking the pretty cool shiny cards and I really didn't know that game at all. I think I was like opening packs for that since like 3 or 4 years old. I remember walking to 7-Eleven, getting a Slurpee, buying Pokemon packs. I remember trying to redo that when I was in like 9th grade, walking like 2 miles to a 7-Eleven. and then them, of course, because this was what, like 2011, 2012, they did not have packs at all. But it was so funny. I was at some like liquor store somewhere recently, and they had Pokemon packs behind. Oh, CVS, right around here.
Oh,
they have
the liquor
Pokemon the liquor store.
The liquor store CVS.
Everyone's favorite consumer value store, everyone's favorite store. That's important to Magic the Gathering.
What
CVS stands for.
Is that what it stands for?
That's what CVS stands for. It's Consumer Value Store.
Is the new place to buy trading card packs.
Well, it has consumer in the name, so
Dude, I know you can get Magic packs at Rite Aid.
Really, Rite Aid?
Yes.
That.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
That's cool.
The Rite Aid by my house legitimately has packs, and they're like couple sets removed, which is kind of cool sometimes.
Yeah. I want to find more stores like that. 'Cause
I think Pokemon kind of brought that back with like the whole like YouTube reveal thing. Like that brought Pokemon back. That brought a whole consumer base for TCGs in general.
so they've kind of expanded into consumer value stores and like
Oh yeah,
I need to name
yeah.
one of my decks that.
consumer value store. Yeah.
Probably like Prosper or something.
So when you were starting playing, you were very much like just kind of kitchen tabling / not even playing with the right rules. Just
yeah,
playing flip
like
cards
house
stuff.
rules.
Yeah,
Especially like up until I went to events, I really like would only justify stuff. I remember once going to events, literally clicking the pieces, like, oh, I can look up rules. I don't need to just like
Make them up as you go.
right, and debate with my friends over like which rule is legit or not. Like,
I love that.
I'm
Like
trying to remember what one was. There was one with Endless Ranks of the Dead where like I just cheesed it and like, I just exploited it to because I had 4 in a 60 card deck. And
if you're like confident enough, then you can get away with anything if
Totally.
no one's looking up the rules.
Totally.
I think this is really interesting. You bringing up these points about you like how kind of when you started playing, because it reminds me of when I started playing like Yu-Gi-Oh when I was really little. That was
Sure.
like the main thing I was into, and it'll always be about like flipping down which card has more stars, like that's
Right.
the one who wins, and like this thing where you're like flipping over cards. And
That's all I thought Yu-Gi-Oh was, literally the stars for
Yep.
years. Like once I actually learned Magic, someone told me like stars mean power in Yu-Gi-Oh, which I'm not even sure if it does.
it's not
I just
exactly
I just believed that for years. I still do not know how to play that game.
yeah, it's an
It's
odd
kind of
one.
close to mana pips almost in a certain way.
There's such an
because-
arbitrary point at like between 4 and 5 stars. We're getting into Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, that's a whole other-
Yu-Gi-Oh was the one I remember on the playground though.
Oh, yeah.
I never
Oh,
played
yeah.
it, but I remember seeing people play Yu-Gi-Oh. And then Pokemon was the like look at my shiny little like
Yeah,
marbles.
yeah.
Literally like marbles from the 1950s,
Yep.
like how our grandparents would trade those. Pokemon took that place.
I feel like Pokemon, while all these games were designed for a similar space and a similar consumer,
Right.
The C and CVS, if anyone was curious, I think that trend with Pokemon has kind of continued, where there is like a competitive scene and there is a scene that kind of plays for like the actual mechanics of the cards. But I think a lot of the market and a lot of the, and I could be wrong about this, but I think from what I've heard, a lot of the market and a lot of desire around certain cards is based off of like which cards are like people are most like which cards are people's favorite Pokemon, or like
Right.
this is like a really sought after card because it has a
Right.
cool art or like a waifu art on it.
Well,
or
they also
something
got
like
the
that.
whole like alt art, like
Yeah.
foil thing that now Magic is adopting way more
Oh,
of those.
yeah.
You showed me that one that's like a textured card. That's been a Pokemon thing for like a little bit now.
Yeah.
Hang on, just real quick. Are you saying that there's not like a competitive scene for Pokemon, or
No, there is one. I think from what I've heard, I think it just makes up like a smaller pool of the player base than
Okay.
like, whereas like a lot more, I could be completely talking out of my ass here, but from what I've heard, I think a lot more people who collect Pokemon cards mainly do it for the collecting aspect rather than the game piece aspect.
and since you guys probably don't know, but do you know if they've changed the rules from like the beginning, or is it very much still the same from the start? Because I remember playing Pokemon when it came out, like
Yeah.
as an actual game.
I think the rules have had tweaks here and there. Again, it's not something I'm an expert at, but I know like they just released a new generation. I don't know if that comes with new specific rule changes or just like a new set of cards, but they've definitely updated it in places, and I have no idea how or where or when. But
The only changes I know about with that game were when I don't know if developer would be the right term, but Wizards made it either around the start or a little after that, and then when they were dropped, I think those were major changes when Wizards came on, and then when they left, because it was literally the people designing them changed hands.
Right.
so when you started playing, one of the first decks or pre-constructed things you said you had gotten was some of the guild kind
Yeah.
of standard decks. And which one was the first one you got again?
The one my brother, I don't know if he either you know what? He did give it to me. It was an Is It Precon, original Ravnica. I remember I carried it with 2 rubber bands around it, probably
Yep.
completely
Classic.
destroying the
Love
cards.
that.
And like, you know, if I ever PGA graded them today, they would be like a 3 or a 4.
That's
you know?
such a classic. Like I've heard so many stories about, like, especially even before then, like in the 90s, people shuffling up without sleeves or like
Yeah.
carrying them in rubber bands.
Oh yeah.
And
And
did
you
you?
stuff it in your back pocket
Yeah,
or
yeah.
in a
But any,
Ziploc bag.
in a Ziploc. That's what I was
Oops!
gonna
I
say.
accidentally sat on my deck.
Hey, now it's like modern foils.
But he actually did give me that deck.
Okay.
I played with it occasionally. I remember it, you know, it might have been an okay deck, but I was a terrible player. So every time that was around when I started to quote unquote actually play the game.
Yeah.
You know, it was more like house rules rather than war bullshit justification of nothing.
Did you remember, like, did you really enjoy playing with that deck? Like, especially retrospectively, like, looking back on it, like, I know you weren't the best
So the
player,
Mossbridge Troll precon was
Okay.
definitely like my first proper deck because that was
Okay.
the first deck bought for me. That Is It precon. My brother gave it to me. I remember bringing it to synagogue. I must have placed it somewhere or lost it, or you know, just literally like I had it and then it was gone. And then it was gone. I didn't have my only Magic deck anymore.
Oh, my goodness.
I remember my brother being like, "I'm not giving you any more because he lost that one." I mean, it made sense.
Yeah.
I think he only had 1 or 2 decks himself. And so eventually, maybe like 2 or 3 years later, you know, it was what was the Mossbridge Troll set? You had it pulled up.
Let me.
It was
It
one of the
looked like
Lorwyn
Lorwyn.
ones.
Lorwyn?
Yeah, Lorwyn. That sounds
was
right.
Lorwyn
So was
for
yeah,
sure?
it was Lorwyn.
I forget if that was before or after Ravnica, but it, you know, it must have been around the same time because I remember losing that and pretty soon after kind of begging for a new deck.
Yeah.
I remember, so with that Mossbridge Troll deck, playing it, I have quite a few memories with it. I still have quite a few of those cards. I think the best memories I have would be when my brother would lend me his Selesnya deck.
Oh, okay.
Because he had a like OG Ravnica token Selesnya deck. I guess that's always been Selesnya's theme. I forget their mechanics from third iteration of Ravnica, but
Probably +1 counters or
Something.
tokens.
no, that was population with original Ravnica, where you create
was
a
it
copy
populate?
of each. Populate, right? Not population.
I think, okay, so I had kind of recently opened a box of Return to Ravnica, which is the second one, and I remember seeing a lot of populate cards in that one. So I'm wondering if the
There's a chance those from Return.
yeah.
You know, I think it was. You're probably right about that.
But you were saying you really liked playing when your brother let you borrow the Selesnya one.
yes, that would have definitely been like core memory, because in terms of like color combo, even though I don't play that deck right now, you know, I have the Reese deck that's like
Yeah.
indefinitely unfinished because I don't really have the
Best colors.
the effort to prioritize Magic in my life. You know, I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I have my 2 built decks.
Yeah.
They're decent enough to have fun and play with you guys, but when I start to play 2 regularly because I have 2 decks, it gets pretty boring. But since I've you know, slowed down how much I'm playing with you guys, it's still fun.
Yeah.
But that original Mossbridge Troll precon, I run Mossbridge Troll in that Selesnya deck. I'm sure I run a couple other cards. You know, it's quite good in Selesnya because you get a lot of bodies, and so you just tap up to 10 power pretty easily once you generate that.
So yeah, Mossbridge Troll is a really cool card.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I just
Big
looked it up for the.
boy.
It's expensive in CMC. It's
plus
a
20,
lot.
plus 20.
Yeah,
But
it's insane.
It's a bit of like, especially where we're playing, it could be a mid-game ending card if you prevent blocking and stuff like
Right.
that. But as a kid, that's such a cool card.
Yeah.
Big power, you know.
25.
Oh yeah.
That's massive.
So I thought it was so cool. I remember having a friend of mine. They told me like, this is trash. Look at the CMC, and I just didn't care. You know, I remember for years not caring about CMC.
Oh, really?
I prioritized like less than flavor, more so like instinct. Like I see a card, I read like 2 sentences of it. If it's too many abilities, too complicated, I don't want to read it.
Oh.
You know, I'm in like 6th grade and I really don't care to learn these cards more. But I think around 6th or 7th grade, I stopped playing for quite a bit. Then 9th grade, around Return.
Okay, when like you'd mentioned you'd like gone to like formal events.
Yes.
And like what do you remember what your first like event kind of was, or something around there? What your first few event experiences were? Were they at like a local game store, or
it was at Collector's Paradise.
Okay.
Great place.
Excellent place.
I remember my friend, the same one who told me that Mossbridge Troll is bad because of high CMC in like 4th or 3rd grade. Same person, my brother's friend, a couple years older. I remember quite a few times, maybe not that time, but quite a few times throughout high school, they just drove me to Friday Night Magic, couple of pre-cons. And I remember there was a period, I think Return to Ravnica, I played at least 5 or 6 Friday Night Magics. Like I was
really
going
cool.
like pretty often, because I don't know how often Friday Night Magic happens anymore. Is it still a thing?
Well,
really?
Every Friday.
Yeah.
It's
So
quite a few.
this
games
is kind
too.
of something we've been curious about,
Sure.
because the development of Friday Night Magic, we weren't really around when you were, or
Sure.
a lot of other people were, for like what it used to be like versus now.
When did you start like seriously playing Magic? Or
So, like, I got into it, but it was really only kitchen table Magic right at Ixalan. It was like Amonkhet and Ixalan were like the 2 sets that I like really kind of bought in like bulk.
it's like early 2010s, like 2013.
No,
or
that's a little later, I think. I think it's like later 2010s.
I think it was about
16,
2013.
17?
No, I think it was about 13.
2013 would have been
because that was
like
around
Theros. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
But it was around that same time.
let's see. I think Ixalan would have come out 2017, and Amonkhet would have come around also in 2017.
Okay.
So I'm way off then. Yeah,
Few
like
years,
2017, and like it was like a really popular thing. Like there was a comic book store around the corner from my house that did Friday Night Magics.
Right.
You know, I'm down the street from Collector's Paradise, and you know, I know that they were still doing it at the time.
Yeah.
But I just never got a chance to like go and play. But yeah, that was one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about, because
was Friday Night Magic, and like well, first of all, what format did you usually play? Was it like drafting?
It was draft.
Okay, so
It was draft. It was pass around the table draft.
Okay.
You three pack.
yeah.
There was a specific, I think you
Order?
started passing left and then right and then left per pack.
Okay.
And it was just a really good way. If that's still the same format, draft, in my opinion, if you're trying to build a Magic collection, is the best way to start your collection, because you pick the cards that you're going to take home.
Yeah.
And so rather than pulling packs where you get essentially a bunch of chaff that you might not use for 5-6 years
Right.
until you even care about those other colors, most new players are probably going to stay dual color, tricolor if they're like really risking it. The really like, I forget all the, what is it, Spikes and Jimmys and Johnnies and
Timmy's.
so all the people who are going to be Spikes, they're going to go 5-color in their first year or two. They're going to go, oh, this is sick. Whatever that baby was, that 5-color baby.
Oh, Child of Alara.
Yes,
Board
that-
White Baby.
Yes, that used to be the 5-color deck for Commander.
But so this is like kind of what we've really been curious about.
F&M, right?
Right, like this kind of, we've never played draft.
Okay.
And that's Well, like
You as well, Cody,
pre-release.
or-
I would call
never did
pre-release
draft.
a form of draft, but
Right,
I wouldn't
right.
say it's like the classic
Well,
draft
what
experience.
It's not
Jacob's
the
talking
pack
about.
draft.
No, it's not the pack draft that you got.
Yeah,
Jay,
well,
no.
what I'm talking about is like we've never played like this like typical past the pack draft experience
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
and that's one thing I never thought about is like if you really like just love playing red and that's like for example or like you really love playing blue and that's the only thing you want to like pick up, like you can really tailor like the uncommons and the commons you get from that to just
Absolutely.
be that color.
Totally.
I've never thought about that. I've
yeah.
always just kind of gone into like cracking pack mode where it's like, oh, what'll I get? You know,
Where's an expensive card?
If anything, it's better for chaff cards because
Yeah.
people aren't going to be pulling those immediately.
Yeah.
So there's a chance, I remember a pack would go around a couple times. You would see the same pack a couple times, especially if the table is smaller. And you would end up being like, ooh, I want this card more than the other. I hope no one takes it. Comes back around, no one took it. Shit card. You're not going to use it in your draft deck.
but you want
But
it.
you take it home, you put it in your main deck, or you
Yeah.
keep it in your collection because you think, hey, this might be good in a deck in the future.
Here's a question, and I wonder if you've ever had this experience. I've heard a lot of times people, when they play like draft where they pass the packs around like that, like they'll open their first 2 or 3 packs, get the pulls that they want. And let's say they're going like mono green big stuff or whatever.
for the draft deck or for their home decks?
For a draft deck. Like
Okay,
they're
yeah.
doing it to build a draft deck and they've just started like accumulating like for example mono green
yeah,
big
yeah.
stuff. And then they get like the most expensive card. They open the pack and it's the most expensive card in the whole set.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been in that like position where it's like, "Oh, am I going to take this just because it's like a $20 card now?" Or-
So with the draft packs, you can, if I remember right, you can show the packs to the person next to you. This might not be at all LGSs, but at least at Collector's Paradise, circa early 2010s. Especially since I was a kid, especially since I knew people who would know better for me. I remember my friend Lilith, she built most of my draft decks back then. And it was just it's funny to look back because I went to a pre-con with Lilith in 2019, met her there. And I remember even then literally like showing her my deck and being like, do you think this is good? And her being like not literally, but being like, fuck off. Like, aren't you grown enough to build your own deck at this point?
I love that.
But
that's always good to have friends like that and
for
just,
sure.
like, to have that
So
around.
I remember the 2-sided Jace. I once pulled that, and I had no idea what it was. I saw Jace. I remember hearing about Jace. Even back then, the original Jace was like overvalued, overpowered. And so I got this 2-sided Jace, and I was showing it to Lilith or someone near me who was helping me out, and they go, you should pull that card. Like, because if you aren't, I'm going to pull that card. Out of pack, it was like, this was actually at a pre-con.
a pre-release.
I'm remembering, yes, a pre-release pre-con. I misspoke. I got because that Jace is now like a $14 card.
Something like that, yeah.
But I remember when it came out, because it's pre-release and stuff is overvalued
Right.
before the set comes out.
Yeah.
It was like a $70-$80 card.
Jeez.
I remember like
oh my goodness.
all my friends being like, oh, this is all right. I can't use this in my draft deck. This is a pre-release, remember? And me just like not really caring about it. And I remember Lilith suggested to me to, trade it for cards I wanted. And I just thought, this is a cool card. It's going to gain in value. And literally everyone there was like, no, it's going to lose value. And if anything, long term, like it's not that great of a card. Like it's okay.
This was one sec. Jace Vryn's Prodigy, right? This one?
Yes.
So that would have been, and really nicely about these older pre-release cards, some of them have like the actual dates of the pre-release, which they don't have that anymore.
They don't do that?
They just have like the year stamp. Like it'll say 2023 rather than like
It won't say the actual date.
no. And that's why
That
like
sucks.
I think these dates are so much cool because
We
we
can
can
look
look back.
back then was they had alt art.
Oh,
they did pre-release art, and it was specific cards.
Oh,
and I think
know what you're talking
now what
about.
they do don't they just stamp a random rare or mythic, right?
That's usually what it is. Yeah.
So what was cool about back then was rather than getting a random stamped, you could both get a card that you wanted, because with leaks you could usually see what the colors would be. So yeah,
the one thing I was going to say that's really cool about this is we can literally look at it and be like, okay, you were playing this pre-release on July 11th or 12th of 2015, or
right?
That's when you were doing it, and
right. No, I've tried to save
then.
most of my stamped cards. I have only traded away one. That was a really bad one. It was when they started to do random stamped cards.
Okay. But yeah, so a lot of, from what your experience is, a lot of draft and a lot of like kind of maybe a few pre-release events. When you were at like your Friday Night Magics, was anyone ever playing other formats that you knew of then? Like, was there like a table playing standard or modern or something like that?
So for Collector's Paradise, because that's where I went to all my events when I was going younger, there was at pre-releases some commander groups. Okay. There would be like people that finished early would play a commander game.
Right.
People before the event started would be playing a couple commander games. But I remember specifically with Collector's Paradise back then, they struggled to have anything but pre-releases and FNM. I remember the highest capacity I saw for a pre-release, it's like between 60 and 70 people in that store too, which is so tiny.
Right.
That's a lot.
So I remember everyone kind of squeezed in together.
Yeah.
They had like 5 or 6 tables out. They really like maximized their space, and that was a fun time. For FNM, the most people back then might have been like 30, 25 people, but it was still a good crowd. I remember one of the coolest memories. There was this guy, Jonny, who he had like a pompadour, really, really nice guy. And I remember seeing him at the pre-release and going like, damn, I know this guy from somewhere. When I was a kid at the Hollywood Video, right near the CVS, you know where that is?
The consumer value store.
Right. Going back to that.
Okay, right next to that.
It's like a joint chiropractic or something, or a nail salon now.
Okay.
But that Hollywood Video, I remember this guy Jonny worked at it. My dad had a Hollywood Video subscription, so he would be able to like rent out movies for however long, never get fees, do like 3 a month. And I remember this guy, Jonny, he did the Jonny deal. This has nothing to do with Magic the Gathering properly. I'll relate it back eventually. But so Jonny would do the Jonny deal where he would essentially slip my dad a second VHS or DVD, and my dad just had to return it with the other one. Or he might have just returned it whenever, just as long as Jonny was there.
Dude.
So this guy, years later, I see him at Collector's Paradise, and I caught up with him. He's like, how's your dad doing? It was just a really cool small world moment where, like, because, you know, local game stores are like a slight dying breed.
Yeah.
They've come back because of Pokemon and whatever, you know, collecting has become like a certain value. They tried to bullshit it into NFTs and stuff, but actual collecting is a physical,
it's definitely
hoarding kind of fix, kind of almost like philia that we have.
And I think in general, I guess like a lot of the trading card world, but I think Magic the Gathering especially has gotten more popular over the years. Like Commander has blown up, and as a result, like people are just like flooding to that format. And when did you start, like, because I know you have a few Commander decks now, when did you start getting into Commander more specifically?
That was first Commander deck, 2017, 2016, I think.
So that was like after all of the pre-release. You knew it was, or drafts and pre-releases. You knew it was a thing. What did you ever? So in between that time when you started like drafting and acquiring cards from pre-release.
Yeah.
Did you ever do anything with those cards, like build any decks or try to build any decks? Or did you just kind of like keep them in a collection? You know what I mean? Or
So between those times, I remember building out some 60 card decks,
Okay.
standard,
okay, cool.
and not any. God, I forget the terms, but not any like modern standard. That's when you play within the past couple of years, something like
Like
that.
in
or
the set blocks.
historic.
the actual competitive standard,
Yeah.
right? Where you're playing like. It's like last 2 years, and
Yeah.
then when the year resets, you can like only play last 3 sets, and it's
Yeah.
really weird.
Yeah. Standard is like the rotating format.
We played like Legacy Standard essentially.
okay.
Got
Or
it.
like,
You know, and truly like House Rules. I don't know if we ever looked up ban lists. There's a good chance no one ever had anything proper banned.
yeah. Or if you did, it probably wasn't like synergizing with the right
Synergized
pieces
or
to be-
utilized once played.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So I had what is now my Scarab God deck. Like there's been iterations of that since like 2013, 2014.
Oh, wow.
That's when I probably first started building.
was it
out
always
decks.
a Demir deck?
It was always a Demir deck. It was cycling between a zombie token deck.
Okay.
I mentioned 4 Endless Ranks of the Dead.
Yes.
That was very fun to play because once you get
So
2
many
out, you
zombies.
just double.
Yep.
But once you get 3 out, you or 4 out, you quite literally triple. And so it was some shit where once I had 1 out, pretty much my friends would like freak out because it would be pretty soon before I would get another one. And
Okay, that is a
it went
That-
between it was never proper Ravnica Demir. Ravnica Demir's kind of trash. It's never had it's kind of like the Illuminati Guild.
Yeah.
It's more theme than actual execution. They've done a good job at the aesthetic of it, but then that
Definitely.
leads to the execution because the whole aesthetic is illusion and mystery. So then almost the execution itself being like weird is kind of fitting with it. It's very weird.
It's hard to obscure the fact that you're playing a Demir deck when you're playing black and blue cards, right? Like it's not a mystery anymore.
It's funny because I think that like Innistrad Demir does a better job of showcasing like actual like what the colors do
Right.
than like Ravnica Demir.
like
I
like
see.
the pie themology over
Yes.
the Ravnica like flavor themology. Right.
I mean,
'Cause
Ravnica Demir had mill, just
there's
It had mill.
cards in there,
but like Innistrad Demir is like zombies and reanimation
Death and despair.
Yeah.
liches,
Draw.
I just mono black with extra steps.
Diablo 2 aesthetic. Like
I feel like definitely Ravnica had a flavor of that because you can't, if you're playing those colors like that's going to translate over from any set. But maybe
Yes.
Innistrad captured that like more stereotypical like, mill kind of value-ish graveyard, draw
Right.
card, counter spell,
Right.
all
Yeah.
that stuff a little better maybe. So do you ever find yourself, or at the beginning maybe, I know at the very beginning you said you found yourself gravitating towards big stompy creatures,
Sure.
which is maybe
When I was
more
young, yeah.
like a green kind of
green, red.
green-red.
Yeah.
And then at some point you started kind of delving in more towards like blue and black and kind of like
Yes.
what was that transition like? to-
That transition, God, there must have been some pre-con I bought or some card I pulled. I think I just remember literally seeing zombie creature type and going, I want to build a zombie creature deck. And I think that's also a very easy way for new players to gravitate towards is tribal.
Tribal
Yeah.
is so much fun sometimes.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, tribal's really good because it usually the designers are really good about taking flavor themology and tying it in with everything about mechanics and execution and that also those kind of like meta feelings that you get when you're playing, the kind of like Dungeons and Dragons relation to this where like
Yeah.
you're never properly role playing, but the actual way you build your deck is this personalized development.
Yeah.
And that development is then shown on the stage of playing it with other people.
It's definitely
And-
an expression of yourself.
And when you get that spotlight, ooh, that's
Yeah.
fun. When
Yeah.
people are looking at you and they go, fuck you. You know, they're just like, God damn it. If you're ever at LGS and like you're in a 4 or 5 player Commander game, and people see you play that 1 or 2 cards, and those are like your cards.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, you know, these tutors and all this crap, like it's optimal playing, but then
Yeah.
I tutored for this card, not even because it's that great, but because I want to feel a certain way. I'm trying to remember the card I run in my Rakdos deck, the one that makes you play a random card essentially from your deck.
Possibility Storm. I love that card.
Possibility Storm, despite not being a Ravnica card, is themology wise like a Rakdos card. It is
Yes.
chaos.
It is pretty chaotic.
Yep.
And so I like building towards
Yeah.
themology.
Definitely.
That's also kind of why I struggle to like build out, because I don't really care about mechanics. I more so care about like these like meta feelings that I
Right.
get, that, you know, probably because I've played since a young age, it's this like this association of like curiosity and self-expression.
And
Yeah.
I think like one of the reasons why Commander is so great too is there's so much more of an opportunity for, you know, you to potentially run like these like tutors or whatever effective cards that you can go and grab
Right.
like your signature card or something close to that.
Yeah.
Feels more personalized than the optimal card. I know that's something I struggle with separating sometimes myself, is like, oh, I really like this card, but this card is better in every way. Should I cut this card out
Right.
that I really like? And
Right.
I think there's something so important and so valuable about keeping that card in that you like,
Oh,
even
yeah.
though it's not the best.
Oh, yeah.
It's a expression of yourself. And if you ever get a chance to like go off with that card or even win with that card, it's like a huge feeling.
I run that 2-card kill combo in my Dimir deck, and I only run it pretty much. It's decent.
Which 2 cards?
It's the
Peer
Mil-
into the Abyss is one of the pieces.
Is
right?
it? I
It's the
don't
one that makes
remember
you
that
draw half your library.
mill half your library. Someone else
Oh,
mills
it's a
half their
different-
library, and before that, you play an enchantment that whenever someone puts a card in their graveyard, they then have to mill that many cards. And so what's so funny about that? It's not even a proper instant kill combo, because the next turn step, they technically don't die like they traditionally would.
They would have to
it's
draw.
a draw out.
Yeah.
And so here's the funny part too, is if they have an odd number of cards. I used to play it like this. I played it so much my friends wouldn't mill half their deck. They would count their whole deck. Because if you have an odd number of cards, you
end
keep
up with-
1.
So if you have like a card
you
draw
have 0.
spell, if they have a card draw spell, they could manipulate it to like keep a certain amount in there. Like if they have
No. It's if it's odd,
yeah,
then you only have 1 left.
well, that's what I'm saying.
But if they were at an
before-
even number,
if they're at an even number and they have a card in their hand that's like draw a card, they would want to play that if they were at
Oh, if it's an
even to get
instant
to
and they're
odd.
responding to me.
Yeah.
Yes. So they could theoretically have like a final right and get to
Right.
odd. Right.
Yeah.
There
remember
could be
there-
some weird
I'm pretty sure you've gotten me with that one before. Probably
Yes.
one of the times we were playing 1v1 or something. But I remember
Yes.
having to like, wait, what? And then my deck was just gone. And like,
Yes.
that was a very, like, you're not going to get to play that every time. Or maybe it's
No.
not the best combo to get someone to mill their library out. But you got to do that. And
Right.
it was very much like, this is what you wanted to put in this deck.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not even AoE. It's not affecting everyone. It's a proper tactical nuke. I'm targeting one person and ending their life, essentially. Ruining their day.
Yeah, single targeted alpha strike. If
Yeah. I have a good Rakdos card that thematically works well in that deck. And it works well overall. I forget the name of this as well. Sorry for not knowing
That's
any cards
fine.
names.
How
That's
dare you.
fine.
But it's that card that when it deals damage to a player, it rather than dealing damage sets their life to 1.
Master of Cruelty.
Master
Yes.
of Cruelty. That's great theme for Rakdos, and it is a Rakdos card. So
Yeah, it's a lot of
Absolute
fun.
flavor.
so
win there
that's
for
one
sure.
where it's not overly optimal, but it actually does work I think Rakdos is a better for my two decks, my Lich God deck and my Rakdos deck. I think the Rakdos deck, and this is kind of going off topic of what any listener would care about, but I think the Rakdos deck overall plays out with a aesthetic and a theme that kind of centers around it, works well with it better. I think that Lich God deck, you can literally tell it's been 10 years old. There's so many random cards in there, and I've just over the years gotten a lot of really good zombie tribal commander cards. And so that deck has a lot of good value in terms of money. You know, a lot of quality cards in it. It's not the most optimized deck, but
so you had this like what's it called, format, or like a pre-commander
legacy
deck, like,
standard,
right? This legacy standard like Dimir
legacy
deck from
60 card,
2013 or whatever. And was that the first thing that you evolved into a commander deck, or
well, because my Lich God was my first commander, I think. I played that format with other people's decks a couple times. But yeah, I don't think I never bought a precon at that time.
Okay.
I've bought them since.
Yeah.
But around then I just had enough and was given enough. I think I remember hanging out with Lilith one day and her just helping me build out the deck to be
nice
proper commander deck.
So that's just kind of where you were like, your friends were playing commander and you wanted to try it out, so you just turned what you had already as a 60 card deck into a 99 singleton card deck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
this was like from 2015 to like 2017 was around when this happened.
And when you started playing, like what was playing commander like? Was it like, I mean, I'm assuming it was different than it is today.
I'm trying to remember, because majority of the things I would go to and events I would go to was F&M. The first commander events I would go to, it was at Game Ogre.
Okay.
This was 2017, 2018. And I remember there just being a transition period where Jakob,
our friend Jacob, he started really taking the rules seriously, and it became a situation of me and two friends of mine, me, Jacob, and Rion. We all played semi-regularly together. We had our friend Logan, who had a collection from back in the day, kind of like a Pokemon I'm pulling cards collection, like not even really caring about it. So we eventually wrapped him into it too. But I remember around when Jacob started taking the rules seriously and started calling out me and Rion for our house rule bullshit. And my friend Garrett. I remember my friend Garrett played too. We all slowly transformed our decks into commander decks just because it ended up being that with that whole legacy standard thing, once you actually start to learn the rules, it's so exploitable. The fact that you can run 4 of any card.
Yeah.
Any I think back then the rules were anything but legendaries and rares and mythics. So like I said, 4 endless ranks of the dead.
That was a format I don't think I've heard of, but so wait, 4 of any card,
but legendaries, rares and mythics. I don't think you could run 4 legendaries, rares or mythics. Yeah, I'm repeating myself.
This might be either a format I haven't heard of, or like a format that's like kind of like naturally developed over like. But that's really cool.
Yeah, that's just how we played it.
It makes sense, like when you really think about it.
It is a really cool way to build a deck. Yeah.
Here was the bullshit rule that did exist back then that does not exist anymore. Is same name card on the board. You guys know that old rule?
Yep.
Oh,
where you play. I can't remember if it was you just play 2 Jaces in general, or if it has to be the same Jace.
Now it's the same card.
Same card.
Like it would be the same Jace because like there's 6 of them. You could play all 6 at the same time.
Yeah, you could have a whole Jace tribal commander deck and put them all on the board. But.
So do you remember if how it worked, Cody?
So I know before, like this is before I was even playing, but it would have been that like if you cast like Party Jace and then you wanted to cast like the Dual Face Jace, you would have to like sacrifice Party Jace.
Right. Yes. And on top of that, if other people played any other Jace, yours would die.
Old school legendary rule was that, like, way back in the day, was like, if you both had Nicol Bolas, one person would play Nicol Bolas, and if the other person the opponent played Nicol Bolas, I don't remember how they decided, but one of the Nicol Bolases got destroyed.
I think the first one. It's the one on the stack took priority.
Okay.
And then that one would resolve because technically, you think about theme, you're thinking about this battleground that we're creating.
He gets
putting
summoned
soldiers
on one side, and then now he's getting resummoned on the
other side.
Yeah.
How can he exist in two instances? Even though you also are like accepting multiverses exist.
Yeah.
But I guess it's not like a multiverse where the same iterations exist. It's a multiverse,
parallel universes.
Right. It's opposite universes. Right.
Yeah,
right.
that makes the legendary creatures that legendary mechanic, it's not perfect in its current iteration, and maybe the old one was better for flavor purposes, but the new one, like the old one in terms of mechanics, like, would be a nightmare to, like, like if everyone shows up to a Commander game with the same commander.
That's what it ended up being was because I started playing Commander when that rule was still a thing. Essentially, you just, especially from in a small, kitchen table group.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't build the same decks. Literally, if you had the same colors, you would rather get a different commander than have this, checkers game of I claim yours, you claim mine, and go back and forth.
It's actually kind of funny. It reminds me of an old school Dungeons and Dragons rule, whereas now there's a counter spell you can do to counter another creature casting a spell. The way you did it in the past was by casting the same exact spell that they were casting at the right moment. So it's a really interesting sort of dynamic like that, because in Magic, you just have counter spells and you can just do that. But,
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting to view a resource as a form of removal because it just happens to be the same thing your opponent's playing.
Right. It was, and it wasn't even necessarily same thing. It was if you played one kind of Jace and someone played another kind of Jace.
Oh my god!
Since Jace can't exist in two iterations, even though it's technically like once you're getting further enough, it's different universes, Jaces and stuff. So it doesn't even make sense, and that's probably partly why they changed it, but they also mainly changed it, I'm sure, because
because people,
it's a nightmare.
People want to play the same cards, and they're going to keep printing legendary things. So eventually,
and the meta just like forces people to play certain things.
Right.
It makes too many instances of events happening not fun or not play out well.
It's like how Mana Burn became obviously a bad mechanic. You guys know Mana Burn.
Yeah. Back in the day, that was another thing where if you had unspent mana in your mana pool,
at the end of turn.
Was it
end step?
It was end step, because I know now there's all kinds of things where mana goes away at the end of like main phase 1.
Really?
Combat. Like, you can't have floating mana unless
through your whole turn.
Unless it specifies on the card. Like if you move from main phase 1 to combat and you have like 3 floating red, it disappears. Yeah.
Really?
And there's that Rada that like makes things a little complicated because it adds like 2 mana during your combat step.
So you have to use it during your combat, or else it goes away
during
real quick.
Second main. Wow.
Not even during second main. You have to use it in combat.
Because
combat.
There's attackers, defenders, and then proper
damage.
Combat.
And then after that, it goes to main phase. So after the combat phase, the mana would go away, and then it's like, well, I just made 2 red mana for nothing. But.
So we're like going in the opposite of Mana Burn, rather than like mana at the end of turn punishing you.
And there's like old cards that I think potentially played with older rules like that, where now they're almost useless, where it's like you make like cumulative upkeep, you make like X red mana in your upkeep phase, but like if you use that now, you make the red mana in your upkeep and then it immediately goes away
before first main.
First main.
So you need instants during upkeep,
or abilities or anything like that you can do at instant speed.
Or something that says maybe you
God.
have like a permanent on the field that's like this mana stays for the rest of your turn or whatever. But this
Right.
was like a card printed in like, prior to 2000. Like
Sure.
really,
You're talking
really-
like Braid of Fire, right?
I think I'm thinking of Braid of Fire. Yeah, like that one is. It for modern purposes, it just like exists, and then it's like, okay, here's red mana. Now it's gone. But
Right.
like,
Right.
there's certain strategies even now that can can that.
Yeah, there's a commander that brings back mana burn. It's great for that.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Well, not good for you.
I was gonna say you gotta give that to somebody else.
That'd be a fun commander to build.
So the first commander deck you built was essentially you took modified your 60 card deck, turned it into that. What was the next one that you built?
Next one I built after that. The Reese deck has existed in some form or another for a while. My brother eventually gave me his collection because he was never going to use it. So I got that original Ravnica Selesnya Precon.
Oh, cool.
I split that up. I had a bunch of my own Selesnya cards from Return. I had for years at F&M's been pulling, white and green cards to slowly build out that deck. And I remember creating a proxy for Reese because at the time he was like $45-50. And he's like $14 now, $7 even. And so I had, oh my God, what did I call it? I call it like mass populate or something like that. And I drew a pregnant Reese on the card too. Because if you guys remember his ability, he essentially has, mass populate.
Yeah.
He
Yes.
populates all your cards.
He just keeps making more and more and more.
Yeah.
Pregnant Reese.
I remember creating token cards, and they were so weird. I had it 3 stacked up on one card because I had so many different tokens
Oh
in
my
that deck.
God.
And I wasn't about to be able to, like, at the time, I wasn't willing to, like, buy fake tokens. I'm not even sure if they really made those back then. I think they've started making the fake tokens in just the past couple of years, but I'm
The
sure
dry erase ones, or like Etsy.
Etsy, but that thinking out loud, those Etsy ones have probably existed for years.
Probably.
I just don't remember people using those, and it might be me seeing you guys use them now. But I remember people like there were people that would keep tokens, and there were people that wouldn't. The people that wouldn't, your phone, a lighter, literally whatever that can obviously be vertical and horizontal.
Whatever's in arm's reach.
Right. That's what becomes a token. And then I remember at events, and I'm sure you guys still see this, people who go, "Are you going to keep your tokens? Are you going to keep your chaff cards?" And I'm sure people nowadays start to keep them because there's occasionally those like, like
$60 tokens.
Like colorless 7/8 dragon, and just because it's colorless and just because it's 7/8 and a dragon type, and there's one ever printed, now that token is worth like $10 or whatever.
They go crazy. I actually picked up. Well, this is kind of unrelated, but I picked up really old tokens.
Oh, yeah.
Like from a bulk bin, and it was like they were just super old, like probably around when some of the first tokens were printed. And
Sure.
I like looked them up, and they're like $20 like a piece, and I'm like,
Jesus.
for a token, like.
Yeah.
But so you were playing that, and then eventually, I know you made a third deck, the Rakdos.
The
one.
Rakdos deck that was probably built around 2019, 2020.
Okay. And out of those 3, I mean, has there, I don't know if you've like noticed over time there been any difference, but which one do you think you enjoy right now the most? And which one do you think you maybe enjoyed more like in the past, or has it stayed the same?
I think right now, I think the Rakdos deck is overall my favorite. I think it has an overall great well-roundedness to it, and how I like flavor and theme rounding back into mechanics and execution. I like that deck the most. I think a better deck to win is my Lich God deck. My Scarab God deck. I always say Lich because that's how I theme that deck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that Rakdos deck is literally Rakdos. Is it which one is it? Lord of Riots?
It's
It's the one that
not,
makes the spells cheaper to cast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Lord of Riots.
Yes. I actually originally wanted to make it the coin flip deck, and my friend Lilith once again recommended against it and convinced me not to, because honestly, theme wise, I feel like that coin flip deck fits better because it's chaos.
Yeah.
But it's a rough deck, and so
Not only that, but you just got to flip so many coins.
yes, and that's the thing. That's why I say my Scarab God deck is better, because leaning into Rakdos makes the deck kind of worse competitively, because it kind of putting like Possibility Storm in there, putting all these like pinging cards. The pinging cards actually end up, especially when you're playing multiplayer, being very useful for cost reduction. But
Yeah.
overall, you know,
If you're looking
it's
for
not
that
great to
randomness,
win.
yeah.
You know, but I think my problem with both of my decks is I third party. I think I wait for everyone else to kind of like get to mid game, late game. There's obvious winners and losers, and I kind of like wait for my opportunity to kill the top dog and then take out the rest, or like while the two losers or slowly dying people are like, you know, slowly leaving the game, I'll like eventually build power, like wipe the board and kind of reset it for everyone.
And then that's something that you can do in Commander. It's like something you can just like in a 1v1 game, you can't just like sit back and watch the other player build.
Yeah, you can't slow play it.
You can't slow play 1v1, but you can absolutely sit back in a game where it's like, I'm not the threat, and then like come in late and just start like pinging people. And
yeah, so both my decks really aren't great 1v1 decks, but I overall prefer multiplayer.
Yeah,
I think it's way more fun.
Speaking of which, I had been meaning to ask, when you were doing like your legacy kitchen table stuff, were you doing like 1v1s, or was it multiplayer?
So it was a lot of 1v1s, but I remember also doing like multiplayer and very like light tournament among like me and 2 or 3 other people, essentially like, you know, having 2 people play, and winner plays next person or loser plays next person, or however, you know.
Oh, you never tried to jam like just a third person in, all start at 20 life and...
I remember doing a couple multiplayer ones. You know, the problem with the 20 life, like you said, and multiplayer is, and this happens in so many multiplayer games, is unintentional arch enemy. It's the person that forget like how they're playing. It's literally like when we play here, it typically ends up being Mark. Everyone kind of like targets Mark, and so back then it was my friend Rion. It's a host thing, I think.
Is it?
I think that's
the host the power move.
I don't know.
I think that's the unconscious psychology of it.
I think
Because
I think it's a little bit more than that, because I haven't played with Rion, but Mark does tend to build a little bit more aggressive sort of decks. You know, he tends to build more proactively than reactively, whereas Cody, you know, will like kind of like bide his time, leave mana open. Yeah, I'm not a threat. Don't look at me, guys. You know, Mark is just kind of like, here are my cards. They're on the table. What are you going to do about it?
So
Rion considered a host power.
You know,
move.
it's good. I think the host thing is kind of, you know, a throwaway comment to a degree. I remember when we played at your house, you slightly became the arch enemy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No.
When we were at Cody's
So
house,
I think it does
play.
play into a certain subconscious thing, but I am thinking back to Rion's deck. It was a spirit tribal deck.
He told me.
And you guys know they aren't commander type cards, but the tribal commanders from original Innistrad. So I run one in my zombie deck. They're all 2 color. There's a zombie one, a vampire one, and a spirit one.
They're like lords, or they give
No,
like spirits
they're
plus-
like 2 to 4 cost like quote unquote commanders, not deck commanders in
Are they
commander
called
format.
commander, like on the card?
Are they
so.
legendary creatures?
No, they're like if you're in a squadron, they're the commander of the squadron, and so they all played into like the themology of the cards themselves.
Okay.
God, I need to look up the name and find it. But he ran a spirit deck, and
I see.
what all of them did, the zombie one, the vampire one, and the spirit one, was they would play into tribal. So like the zombie one, when a zombie would die, ping 1 damage to an enemy. The vampire one was, God, give like all vampires undying or something like that, really good. But the spirit one was the best because it gave all spirits hexproof.
Oh.
And so you get 2 of those out, you essentially prevent tribal hexproof being
that
removed.
Diagraph
Because it gave all other spirits hexproof, but we're playing 60 card, you run 4 of those, you just get 2 of them out, you have permanent hexproof.
The Drog Skull Captain.
Drog Skull
Yes,
Captain.
yes.
Yeah, he was in my David Jones
captains.
deck. Yeah,
They're the Innistrad captains. They're really fun cards. They if you run a tribal deck, especially a commander deck, you will run one of those if that's your tribe.
I used to have them in my spirit
and
deck.
did
So-
you have Diagraph Captain?
I had Diagraph.
Yep. Okay, that's what I was
So
thinking. of.
captain, not commander. I'm thinking in like military terms. So,
Yeah.
but
Okay, very cool.
he ran right, and Stormkirk captain
There
for,
you
for
go.
vampire, right?
That's all 3. At least
So
the 3 that we
he
found.
he ran 4 of those spirit captains, and kind of like my 4 endless ranks of the dead, it was really frustrating.
Because his board becomes untargetable if both are out.
He bragged at the time about being banned from a shop for that deck. And so because he bragged about it, because inadvertently he became the archenemy of the group. And,
Right.
And it was funny just because over time, as Jacob became the like, I forget the Spike and whoever of those 3 is the rules nerd.
Yep.
I think it is the Spike. I forget
They'd be the
the Jimmy,
competitive-
Jonny, and
They'd be
right.
the competitive one, so yeah, probably the rules nerd.
when Jacob started to become the rules nerd, he slightly became the archenemy, and then when he became the deck building guy, he really became the archenemy.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you guys ever play with him, and
We do.
I've had this with you guys, but you build a new deck, and this is not something I've experienced because I don't build decks like this. I don't have this thought process. Mm-hmm. I have kind of a layman's thought process about my deck building. Optimal deck building, and then you go, hey guys, I brought a new deck. And it's like your 30th to 100th deck you've built.
Yep.
Yeah.
From scratch too. I'm not talking a pre-con broken apart. You're bored at home and you go, these cards will work together.
Exactly.
Jacob started becoming that guy. And that's something I haven't experienced because I haven't gotten that deep into deck building. My Rakdos deck is pieced together out of I bought a pre-con after I grabbed a bunch of cards and said I could build something out of this.
Right.
But so Jacob would come to the group with a deck. And this was when we got to Commander, and we would be like, he would be like, "Oh, it's a new deck. It's not going to be good." And over time, those new decks went from being the loser deck to being like, God, I remember the turning point, and this is when I really stopped playing Magic as much because it kind of killed the luster. Was the infinite combos.
Oh.
The first time I saw Jacob play an infinite combo, it kind of like clicked something in my head, and I said like, this game kind of sucks. Like I hate
as soon
to like
as he broke Commander, you're like,
Yeah,
No,
as-
but Commander is a broken format.
Yes. And any expanding game for over 20 years is going to be broken.
Yeah. Especially if all of the cards are allowed in the same place at the same time.
Like Commander, yeah.
And it's like there are those infinite combos that I definitely get, like where you kind of lose that. I think there's been times in my life that For me, it's more so been frustration with my own decks that I've built, but I definitely get that where it's like, you know, you're playing this game, you kind of have this idea of power level and what's good and what's bad, and then someone just like sits down, plays 2 cards, wins the game, and you're like, what?
It's like you're a casual queue player for any video game, and you play with a ranked player, and you go like, oh, there's like levels to this, and there's a good chance he's not even that good. You know?
No, exactly. That's a
like
great way to
I
put
remember with Smash Bros. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the first time you play someone who knows how to play Smash Bros.
Oh,
because there's like
yeah.
you know, items and the slumber party and like the Super Bowl in the other room while the parents are watching the football game. There's that Smash Bros. And then you get to like, because we're in SoCal. And so this is not Magic the Gathering, but SoCal is the Smash Bros. Region.
Yep.
And you know that one guy who happened to go to tourneys a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
And he just like, I've been that person in Smash Bros. Too.
Yep.
So that's funny is because thinking back on it, around the time I stopped being into Magic as much, I started getting into Smash Bros. More. And that was probably because I got that kind of ego boost that like, oh, I'm the top dog. Because I would play with other people. I remember people cursing me out for Smash Bros. Because I would like, you know, it was 4 stocks. I 4 stock them, and like there's some people that would get me at like 10-20%, and they haven't played for like 10 years since Melee, and like.
But then you jump from that to playing against like somebody who's like actively just playing every time, and they stock you, and you're like, this game has such a huge learning curve that it goes from like the, you know, like you were saying, like Super Bowl in the other room, just hanging out with buddies to
the
like
casual, like kitchen table,
just constant like attack, deflect, dodges, like short hopping combos, and it's a completely different world.
No, I remember the first time I got wave dashed.
Oh god! You see someone moving like that, and you just think like, what is going on?
You just walk off the stage,
right.
But to get a little bit back on topic here, in your time playing Magic, like from the beginning, have you noticed any like major changes in either the player base or like the typical person you'd play against? I know you've been playing in different types of games, obviously, but has there been any big shift in like Magic as a whole from your eyes?
The couple big shifts I've seen are, it's interesting because you see it with both player base but also marketing. I think those are 2 kind of like key aspects to see how the audience is taking a product.
Absolutely. Marketing is huge.
Marketing literally is, they work to optimize the audience, you
perception,
know, buying and right. So growing up and seeing the ads in the mid 2000s, these like Hot Topic style, like you know, like AIM, like GIF type like things where it's like, God, I'd love to play you one of those ads sometimes because they're so fun. It's like a live action kid on a blue screen, and he's like standing in a city and there's like rocks falling, and it's like, do you have the potential? And then it flashes like the Planeswalker logo real quick, and it's like, what is going on? Like, this is a fantasy game. This is not like Hot Topic Invader Zim t-shirt. Like,
and now I've noticed. I mean,
that was like the first kind of, you know, like late Y2K internet edge Linkin Park aesthetic.
Yes.
Magic was trying to serve that. I think Innistrad thematically served that well. I think overall they were probably still designing for their core base. But it was interesting to see like how Yu-Gi-Oh was the game kids played.
Yep.
Pokemon was the game kids bought. And Magic was what the nerds did. It was not what the cool kids would do. The cool kids played Yu-Gi-Oh!
The cool kids probably didn't play trading cards at all.
That as well. Definitely. That most of all. But so I saw that. And then like more towards high school, they stopped doing that advertising and made it more of like, there was a big social media push, of course, during 2010's social media era. And stuff like F&M was pushed super hard because social media doesn't exist without the social aspect. And so, I remember like seeing like Facebook ads all the time and stuff. And so it went from like the way I perceived it was like, oh, my brother and his like nerdy friends are doing this like cool, weird, like chess Go type thing. The same friends that my brother played Magic with played Go, by the way. I learned Go around that time. I still haven't learned how to play chess, but I know how to play Go. Very weird.
Dude, you teach me Go and I'll teach you chess.
I'm not a good Go player, but
even better, teach me Go.
I will. I'll teach you the ladder and the snake and all that. I watched the anime when I was a kid. That's why my brother got into it. There was a Go anime. What? I remember for years, probably like hoping there was going to be a Magic the Gathering anime, and wasn't there going to be? Or
there's a manga for it.
There's a manga,
yeah, and like the art looks really cool when I've seen like screen grabs from it and stuff like that.
Right.
So fingers crossed that they do one. It would be dope.
I remember the original anime art with the dual decks that were Japanese exclusive. I remember seeing people play with anime art, and it was only in Japanese because I think they now release anime art in English for some Magic cards.
Yeah, they did that with the Jumpstart.
Alt art, right?
Alt art, yeah.
It depends. Like they did it for like the new Kamigawa set. They did it in a couple of Jumpstart ones.
And oh my God, there was that amazing what's his name? The horror manga artist.
Junji Ito, LS Storm.
That is so awesome. They got him to do a secret layer. I'm not a fan of secret layers per se.
That a secret?
No, they had the Junji Ito secret layer, which had like 5 cards, which are just beautiful.
Yes.
But then he also did like a couple of the treatments for...
The first one he ever did was a Liliana Dreadhorde General.
I remember...
Wait. He did the anime Liliana?
Yes. And it's very expensive, and I want it.
So badly, right?
Yeah.
I remember, the eyeball girl that Junji Ito, the famous picture he has with the spiral.
Yeah.
I got that a shirt with it in like 10th grade. I remember not knowing the artist, but thinking it was cool, going to a Magic event and someone being like, oh, that's a sick Junji Ito shirt. And I'm like, what? And so that's just a funny like turnaround of events that like almost 10 years later, he now has made art for that.
Yeah.
I remember my brother like becoming friends with this game developer, Edmund McMillan. He made Super Meat Boy, Binding of Isaac, all sorts of stuff. He then like a couple years later designed a Magic card. Like, it's interesting how they've slowly introduced that. It was like the MLP Transformers Hasbro collab, and now it's evolved into the secret layers. So that's the new marketing, I guess, relating it back to those different eras.
So that's kind of what you've noticed changing over,
going back to consumer value store. The consumerism has been optimized within all of it. And so now the secret layers and the overproduction of products. I mean, it's insane. There's that graph you can find that shows like product release by year. And then
it's not Junji Ito, the Liliana. Yeah, it's the Final Fantasy artist.
Yeah, I was just looking that up. Yeah.
Okay. Whoopsies. Was it the OG like FF like 1 through 3 artist?
What's his name? Yoshitaka, what was it?
That's I haven't seen those. That's awesome. They got him to do it.
So that was one of the exclusive Japanese arts for. Let me look this up really quick. Make sure I get this right. It's.
So I guess just to keep
Yoshitaka Amano did this Liliana.
Okay.
And it looks so cool. Yeah. No, awesome. I love that card and I want it very much. It is not Junji Ito, but it gave me the same vibes because it's like dark. Right.
And it's also Japanese artists.
Yeah.
They're both like less stereotypical like manga art.
Yeah.
More like stylized towards their own look, as well as like exaggerated detailed features.
So the marketing is really what
it's how you can see the product slowly evolve in a certain way.
That's a really good telling point, just to like almost go back and look at even old ads for it.
Right.
Like, it's really cool.
Right, because also think like Commander existed before precons.
Yep.
Yeah.
But precons made it, kind of verified by Wizards. Like they went, whoa, well, this is a thing. We can make money off of it. We'll feed into that community. Especially once you start to get to the cards that are like very format specific. Like
Yeah.
once you start creating those cards, it's like, oh well, because they were doing Plane Chase around that same time too, and you see that coming back with the new set, how they're integrating
Yeah.
Plane
Yep.
Chase into it.
Yep.
That's very cool in my opinion, because
think
if
so, too.
anything, Plane Chase was one of my favorite formats. I think it really it adds in that like random factor that CEDH kind of removes.
Yeah.
Where it you know, like CEDH leans towards chess, where it's like a strict set of rules. I think like Plane Chase leads towards like Mario Party, like
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
fun.
you get a random
Yes.
Right.
little effect that all of a sudden affects one person and or affects people differently.
Right.
So also, you know, I'm curious about how your interaction with the game has kind of changed over time. I know kind of post quarantine and all that stuff, maybe that was kind of a point where you stopped going to those Friday night magics as much,
Yeah.
or stopped hanging out with friends as often and never got back into it, or
Sure.
like what do you think there's like, other than that, just like a reason that you've gotten maybe into a different form of magic or out of an older form?
I think there's a certain level of like product fatigue.
Yeah.
I think the amount of product.
God,
and-
especially after as long as you've been playing.
Yeah. Because any old product, especially if they're still releasing stuff of it, you know, there's like there's bands who people go back and they go like, they should have stayed together. And when you hear interviews from them, they go, no, we left on top. Our late albums would have been the same late albums of any band. Nirvana is known as Nirvana, not because they made like, trying to think of some like crap album from another group, but you know, they had those
They
like,
didn't make Chinese Democracy.
sure. Yes.
Great
yes.
example.
Yes. But they, you know, they didn't like fall off later in their career.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's this thing of like Sesame Street and SNL and like all these products. What you grew up with, it's the best time. It's the nostalgia. It's the amygdala aspect of where you're thinking back. And
The Simpsons.
Yes. The best era of The Simpsons is the era you grew up with. All these different products. It's interesting how it works like that. So I have this nostalgia for what I grew up with, and there's kind of that old man attitude of like, oh, all that newfangled stuff sucks. All these newfangled mechanics and their secret layers with their My Little Ponies and their Transformers.
And their attractions.
Right. So there's that is a aspect that has kind of stopped me from getting back into it as much. I think another aspect was that power creep within our group that happened. I think when Jakob started to build CEDH decks, this is like 2018, I believe.
Or even just the infinite combos, maybe.
Well, that's what I mean by CEDH, because infinite combos, like, you don't see in casual.
Well, there's what CEDH is right now is like, okay, you have to have a plan down at the very beginning. You have to be like keeping a hand that you start turn 1 and like go. Like you got to be winning turn 3 or 4. And there's some infinite combos where it's like, okay, here's this 7 mana permanent and here's this like 8 mana permanent, and now it goes infinite. But I think there's like there's all kinds of middle ground in there. But you know, if you're not expecting to play against infinite combos and then you get infinite combos played against you, it's not a good.
It's a feels bad moment.
It feels unfair.
Sure. Yeah,
Yes.
It feels very overpowered if you're not ready for it or not expecting it.
So I think there was like power creep within my group that started to make me lose interest to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think just truly the pandemic killed it, because I remember a little bit before the pandemic, I think we stopped getting together to play Magic as much. So Commander, the start of me properly playing Commander is 2017. I started weekly and bi-weekly having people over. It was me, Rion, Jacob, and our friend Logan, and we all played Commander almost every week for like quite a few years.
And I even remember joining in towards the later end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember getting a couple people like try it every once in a while just because there was enough decks. There would be people that would like be there already once it would start, and like so just once it went from like that to CEDH, it started to make me lose interest. But I also started to go to Game Ogre and Commander, not events but nights.
Yeah.
And those got me back into it a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it was probably just it was the combination of quarantine,
Yeah.
and then the fact that like so many products started come out after that.
Oh yeah.
Like 2021 and last year 2022, it's
Yep.
like the amount of products is pretty absurd, and the fact that it's like I almost was forced out of playing this game, and rather than being like, oh, I missed, because it used to be 3 sets a year, or it was
3 to
like
4,
yeah.
For
Like once a quarter, I think.
maybe a special thing once a year kind of deal.
Yes. And so then you come back and it's like, oh, here's like 20 new mechanics in 1 year, calendar year.
Yeah.
There have been introduced 20 new mechanics, and here's treasure cards, and here's like, they introduced this like 2019 or a little bit before, but it was right when they introduced vehicles. That's around when I stopped being into Magic as much. Not anything to do with vehicles. It's not even that great of a
Format or
mechanic.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. It almost relates back to the Moss Bridge troll because you're tapping into.
Oh yeah. I definitely the product fatigue. I mean, you've been playing for like how many years now? Like close to 20, right? If 2005 was when you started.
Introduced to the product, it's going to be close to 20 years that I've at least like had a collection. I have cards from back then. Seriously playing the game, it's probably more like 2010.
Yeah.
Or
10
so.
to 15
so
or something.
yeah, like 13 to 15 years, something like that, I think.
I've been playing, I think we've mainly been taking it seriously and playing seriously since like 2021.
Sure.
And the product fatigue that I've experienced already is unbelievable, because it's been like 2 years I've been into this game and keeping track of everything, or maybe 3, whatever, but like it is absurd because it's just sometimes set, and before the set is even released, they have spoilers for the next set. And before that set comes out, there's spoilers for the next thing. And like coming down the line, you're excited for this product. You're not as excited for that product, but maybe it'll be good. And it is just like beating you over the head with like new thing. And I think that drives maybe people who are more familiar with the game a little bit away. Yeah. Whereas like it might be like each of these opportunities are like a fresh new experience to get in more players. Like here's the Warhammer set, so everyone who likes Warhammer come play. And here's the new Innistrad set, so everyone who likes vampires and werewolves comes play. But when you do it all at once and you want to get people really enfranchised in the game, it's a bit of a nightmare. And especially when you realize like a lot of these, like, I don't know what the exact number is. I know it's something crazy. Like all of the commanders in Magic ever released, like something like half or 3/4 have been released
like
in the last
80% in the last 3 years.
Of commanders have been released in the last 3 years, something like that.
Wow.
So it's a huge shift, but it's really cool to hear the times in Magic that you've gotten to play through, the types of formats even that you've played that we've never tried out. And I know I'm really excited to play Draft one day, like the traditional passing the pack. I know these guys are.
I've got a cube. Let's play. I've got an AFR Draft cube. Let's have some fun.
I think when you find a set that you like thematically and that you really want cards from, I think that's the best time to go to them. Especially if you aren't buying boxes. If you're buying boxes, there's not as much need. But even then, you bring your binder and then you trade your cards.
You
trade up.
Definitely. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. It was
Sure.
absolutely great talking to you, man.
Yeah.
Like learning all about this stuff, just about your past with Magic and getting a better insight for all of that. Anything else you guys want to say before we wrap it up?
I think you covered everything from my end.
Yeah, man. Thank you for joining us, Jacob. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, looking forward to playing more games of Commander and potentially draft with you in the future.
Yes, yes. Very soon. All right. From Mark, Cody, Ron, and Jacob, we're signing out. Later.
Peace.
See ya.
Later.